Have you ever wondered what allows a stone fortress to outlive nearly every person who has ever walked through its gates? What gives its cold, weathered walls the uncanny ability to preserve the whispers of kings, queens, prisoners, and the ravens that have watched over it for nearly 1,000 years? Perhaps history never truly falls asleep. It simply waits for a moment quiet enough to tell its story once again. Tonight, as the outside world gradually grows still, and the lights of the city surrender to the gentle embrace of night, we will walk together through the ancient gates of the Tower of London, not in search of sensational tales or terrifying secrets, but to listen to the slow, steady heartbeat of time itself. From the first Norman stones laid during the reign of William the Conqueror to the glittering crown jewels still used in royal coronation ceremonies today, every stone within these walls carries the memory of an entire civilization. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious. The collective unconscious is the deposit of mankind's entire ancestral experience. Perhaps places like the Tower of London are living expressions of that collective memory. They do more than preserve historical events. They safeguard timeless symbols of power, fear, loyalty, betrayal, hope, and humanity's enduring desire to leave something that survives beyond a single lifetime. When we approach history with a quiet and open mind, we do not merely discover the past of England, we also begin to uncover the deeper landscapes within our own minds. Throughout tonight's journey, we will travel across nearly 1,000 years of history. We will meet kings who built empires, queens who walked to the scaffold with remarkable dignity, prisoners who carved messages of hope into cold stone walls, ravens that became enduring symbols of an entire kingdom, and ancient ceremonies that continue today as though time itself has never truly passed. Each story will unfold slowly and gently, inviting both your curiosity and your mind to settle into a peaceful state of relaxation. Welcome to our channel, a place where history, psychology, philosophy, and timeless stories come together in the quiet stillness of the night. If you enjoy thoughtful journeys like this, told as gentle bedtime conversations, we invite you to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Your support helps us continue sharing meaningful stories so that every evening ends not only with peace, but also with a deeper understanding of history, humanity, and ourselves. Now, take a slow, gentle breath in. Allow your shoulders to relax. Let the busyness of today quietly drift away. The ancient gates of the Tower of London are slowly opening. Beyond these weathered grey stone walls, standing strong for nearly a millennium, lies a world where power, memory, and time are forever intertwined. Our journey begins now. The Tower of Power. Night slowly settles over the River Thames. The lights of London shimmer across the water, while just north of the iconic Tower Bridge, an ancient fortress of weathered stone stands quietly, just as it has for nearly 1,000 years. This is the Tower of London. To millions of visitors, it is one of Britain's most celebrated landmarks. But to history itself, the tower is something far greater, a chronicle carved in stone, where every wall, every gate, and every courtyard preserves stories of power, loyalty, betrayal, fear, and humanity's enduring desire to leave a lasting legacy. Perhaps what makes the Tower of London so extraordinary is not simply its remarkable age, but the astonishing number of roles it has fulfilled within a single place. Throughout its long history, it has served as a military fortress guarding the City of London, a royal residence for the Norman and Plantagenet kings, the home of the crown jewels, the kingdom's royal mint, an armory, a royal menagerie, an administrative centre, and perhaps most famously, the most renowned prison in English history. Every generation has left another layer of memory upon these ancient stones, transforming the tower into far more than an architectural monument. It has become a living witness to nearly a millennium of history. Standing before its immense stone walls, one cannot help but feel that time moves differently here. Modern buildings rise and disappear. Dynasties come and go. Wars begin and end. Yet the Tower of London remains, patiently observing the endless current of history flowing before its gates. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious, "The collective unconscious is the deposit of mankind's entire ancestral experience." Jung used the idea of the collective unconscious to describe the deepest layers of the human mind, where symbols and experiences passed down through countless generations quietly reside. Perhaps, if a building could possess memory, then the Tower of London would be the collective unconscious of English history itself. Every stone seems to have witnessed countless human destinies, the footsteps of kings, the final prayers of queens, the heavy sound of iron doors closing behind famous prisoners, and the calls of ravens echoing across cold winter mornings. Even now, those voices seem to linger somewhere within its ancient corridors. Interestingly, many people know the tower primarily as a prison. Stories of executions, royal conspiracies, and ghostly legends have shaped its popular image for centuries. Yet history tells a far richer story. The prison was only one chapter in the tower's remarkable life. In its earliest years, it was first and foremost a military fortress, built to defend and control the growing city of London. Later, it became a royal palace, the secure repository of the kingdom's treasures and the most visible symbol of the English crown's authority. Perhaps power has always required a visible form. A crown may symbolize sovereignty, but a towering fortress transforms that authority into something tangible. Thick defensive walls, massive gates, and the imposing White Tower were not built solely to repel enemies. They also delivered a clear message to everyone who approached. The king's authority was enduring, immovable, and not easily challenged. Jung often reflected on the profound role symbols play in human life. In Man and His Symbols, he wrote, "Man and his symbols show that it is possible for man to cooperate with the unconscious." For Jung, a symbol was never merely an image. It was a bridge between the visible world and the deeper meanings hidden within the human psyche. In much the same way, the Tower of London functions as a symbol not only of England, but of humanity's ancient desire to create monuments grand enough to embody order, authority, and permanence in the face of time's relentless passage. Yet the longer we contemplate the tower, the more a fascinating paradox begins to emerge. The very walls raised to proclaim the strength of kings eventually became the place that preserved the memories of those who opposed them. Corridors that once welcomed royal ceremonies also witnessed the final footsteps of condemned prisoners. A fortress, built to affirm power, ultimately became a reminder that even the greatest power cannot triumph over time itself. Perhaps that is why history moves us so deeply. It is never simply the story of those who won. It is the story of everyone who lived, hoped, loved, feared, struggled, and eventually disappeared, while the stones remained, silent and patient, bearing witness to them all. If we listen carefully enough, we may discover that the Tower of London is not telling only England's story. It tells the story of every civilization that has sought to leave its mark upon the future. Every stone seems to ask a quiet question. What remains after power, fame, and conflict have faded into the past? Perhaps what endures is not the names of those who ruled, but the lessons they leave behind for generations yet to come. And so, throughout this journey, we will explore far more than one of Britain's greatest landmarks. Together, we will walk through nearly 1,000 years of English history. We will meet kings and queens, prisoners and soldiers, loyal guards and the ravens that have become immortal symbols of the tower itself. We will wander among glittering treasures, shadowed chambers, unsolved mysteries, and ancient ceremonies that continue almost unchanged to this very day. As darkness settles over the old stone walls, the Tower of London seems quieter than ever before. The sounds of the modern city slowly fade into the distance, leaving only the gentle flow of the River Thames beneath the night sky. In that silence, the weathered stones seem to whisper in the language of time. And perhaps, if we are patient enough to listen, every step we take from this point onward will lead us not only deeper into the history of England, but also deeper into humanity's timeless questions about power, memory, and the nature of the human soul. Questions that Carl Gustav Jung believed have always existed within the deepest layers of our collective psyche. The birth of the Tower of London. If the Tower of London could tell the story of its very first day, it would probably not begin with the sound of hammers striking stone or the sight of masons raising mighty walls. It would begin even earlier, on a single day in 1066, when the fate of England changed forever on the fields of Hastings. There, William, Duke of Normandy, defeated King Harold II in a battle that would become one of the defining turning points of European history. From that victory, William earned the name by which history still remembers him today, William the Conqueror. Yet winning a battle has never been the same as winning the heart of a kingdom. A new king may wear the crown, but true authority is established only when his people believe that his rule is destined to endure. William understood this better than almost anyone. So after entering London, his thoughts were not occupied solely with a coronation or his first royal decrees. They turned instead to walls. Walls that could be seen, that could be touched, and that would tell anyone who looked upon them that a new age had begun. The Tower of London was born from that idea. Toward the end of 1066, William ordered the construction of an initial timber fortress on a strategic site along the north bank of the River Thames. Several decades later, that wooden stronghold was replaced with pale cane stone, quarried in Normandy, and transported across the English Channel. At the heart of the new fortress stood what we now know as the White Tower, the building that remains the symbolic and architectural heart of the Tower of London to this day. What is remarkable is that the White Tower was never intended merely to withstand attack. It was also designed to send a message. Power now had a visible form, and that form was built of stone. At the time, London was the wealthiest and most influential city in England. It controlled trade, politics, and much of the kingdom's economic life. To rule England, one first had to command London. And to command London, one had to command the Thames. The river carried far more than water. It carried merchants, armies, messages, and with them, power itself. By placing his fortress beside the Thames, William could observe every vessel entering or leaving the city, control England's most vital transportation route, and deploy military forces with remarkable speed whenever necessary. It was a decision rooted equally in military strategy and political calculation. But perhaps the most fascinating truth is this: William did not simply build a fortress. He built a symbol. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in Man and His Symbols, "Man and his symbols show that it is possible for man to cooperate with the unconscious." For Jung, a symbol was never merely an object. It communicated meanings that reached far beyond what the eye could perceive. A crown is more than gold and precious stones. A sword is more than sharpened steel. And the White Tower was far more than a massive stone building. It declared that a new order had been established. To the Norman rulers, the White Tower represented the stability of a new dynasty. To many Anglo-Saxon inhabitants, however, the enormous white fortress rising above London's skyline carried a very different meaning. It served as a daily reminder that the conquerors had arrived and intended to remain. Architecture, in this moment, became a language requiring no words, no commands, no threats. Its presence was enough. Standing nearly 30 meters high, with walls more than 4 meters thick at their base, the White Tower was an extraordinary engineering achievement for the 11th century. In a city where most buildings were still constructed from timber, this immense block of pale stone must have seemed as though it belonged to another world. Perhaps William understood something that many leaders would later come to understand. People believe what they can see, no less than what they are told. Jung repeatedly observed that human beings respond instinctively to archetypal images. In The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious, he wrote, "The archetype is essentially an unconscious content that is altered by becoming conscious and by being perceived. A tower rising far above every surrounding rooftop is itself an archetype of authority. It awakens feelings of order, of protection, and at the same time, of awe. Perhaps every civilization builds its tallest monuments, not only to see farther, but also to remind people how small they truly are." The White Tower therefore became much more than a military headquarters. It became an enormous political stage. Here, kings welcomed foreign ambassadors, safeguarded royal treasures, and demonstrated the authority of the English crown to visitors from across Europe. As centuries passed, successive monarchs continued expanding the fortress. New curtain walls rose, moats were deepened, gatehouses grew stronger. Yet throughout every transformation, the White Tower remained. Its heart, like a great tree growing ever larger. From its first root, Carl Gustav Jung wrote in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, "The least of things with a meaning is worth more in life than the greatest of things without it." Perhaps what has made the White Tower one of the world's most famous buildings is not merely its size or its age. Its true significance lies in what it has witnessed. For nearly 1,000 years, these walls have watched dynasties rise and fall, rebellions unfold, royal trials convene, priceless treasures safeguarded, and moments that forever altered the course of English history. Every stone was placed, not only to build a wall, but also to build a belief that power could endure. Yet history has always found gentle ways to remind humanity of its limits. Kings died, empires changed. The men who first laid these stones long ago returned to dust. Only the tower remains, standing quietly, as time's unbiased witness. Perhaps that is history's most beautiful paradox. People raise monuments to proclaim their own power, yet in the end, those monuments outlive every dynasty and become storytellers for everyone. As night slowly settles once more over the River Thames, the White Tower stands beneath the moon with its familiar quiet dignity. Nearly 1,000 years have passed since its first stones were lowered into London's earth, yet its silhouette remains astonishingly unchanged. It whispers a gentle truth through the centuries. Power may rise and disappear, but memory endures. And it is from this enduring White Tower that our journey into the Tower of London truly begins, leading us ever deeper into layers of time where stone, humanity, and symbol become inseparable in a story that has unfolded across almost an entire millennium. Architecture in the service of power. If you were to look down upon the Tower of London on an autumn morning, while mist still drifted gently across the River Thames, and the first rays of sunlight touched its weathered grey stone, you might notice something remarkable. This was never a castle built simply to be admired. It was designed to make people stop, to lift their eyes, and to feel an invisible force emanating from every block of stone. Perhaps from its very beginning, the architecture of the Tower of London served far more than a defensive purpose. It was created to communicate a psychological message. The king's authority lives here, and that authority is greater than any individual. At the center of the entire complex stands the White Tower. More than just the oldest building on the site, It is the heart of the entire defensive system, with its massive walls, commanding height, and commanding view over the surrounding landscape. The White Tower resembled the ever-watchful eye of royal authority. For the Normans, it symbolized the arrival of a new order. For the people of London who had just experienced the Norman conquest of 1066, it served as a daily reminder that a different age had begun. There are buildings, constructed for people to live in. There are buildings, created to inspire admiration. And there are buildings, designed so that people would never dare to resist. The Tower of London belonged to the third. Surrounding the White Tower are concentric defensive walls added over many centuries. Rather than relying on a single line of defense, successive English monarchs continuously expanded the fortress, building one curtain wall after another until multiple protective rings enclosed the central keep. Anyone attempting to reach its heart would have to pass through gate after gate, courtyard after courtyard, checkpoint after checkpoint. Every step became slower. Every doorway led only to another. This was not merely military strategy, it was also psychological strategy. As people confronted walls that grew higher, thicker, and more imposing with every stage of their journey, confidence itself began to erode. Long before any battle could begin, the architecture had already done much of its work. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in Man and His Symbols, "Man and his symbols show that it is possible for man to cooperate with the unconscious." Jung believed that human beings respond to symbols far more deeply than they consciously realize. A monumental gateway is never merely an entrance. A towering wall is never simply stone and mortar. They awaken ancient feelings within us of boundaries, authority, protection, and fear. Perhaps William the Conqueror did not merely employ master builders. He also constructed a symbol for the unconscious of an entire kingdom. Another defining feature of the Tower of London was its surrounding moat. Today the moat is dry, its floor covered in green grass. But for centuries, it was filled with water drawn directly from the Thames. The moat certainly made the fortress more difficult to approach. Yet its greatest strength was not merely physical. A broad stretch of water between you and the walls creates a distance that is not only physical, but psychological. Human beings have always felt uneasy when crossing uncertain spaces. The moat created precisely that sensation. It forced every visitor to slow down, to observe, and to recognize that they were entering a place where every rule was determined by those already inside. The gateways themselves were designed with extraordinary care. Drawbridges, portcullises, arrow slits, and narrow passageways ensured that no one could pass through in complete comfort. In times of attack, every entrance could quickly become a deadly trap. Yet one remarkable fact often surprises historians. For most of its history, the Tower of London rarely endured large-scale military sieges. That raises a fascinating question. If it seldom had to fight, why was it built with such overwhelming strength? The answer may lie in the very nature of power itself. A fortress does not always need to wage war to fulfill its purpose. Sometimes, its mere presence prevents war from ever beginning. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious, "The archetype is essentially an unconscious content that is altered by becoming conscious and by being perceived." A massive fortress is itself an archetype of authority. Simply seeing it, people instinctively understand that this place belongs to a force greater than themselves. For this reason, many modern historians argue that the Tower of London's architecture was designed as much to inspire awe and even fear as to defend against attack. Its immense scale was a message. Its silence was also a weapon. Perhaps what distinguishes the Tower of London from so many other medieval castles across Europe is the seamless way it combines practical function with symbolic meaning. The White Tower served simultaneously as a royal residence and an armory. The moat functioned both as a military defense and as a visible boundary of royal authority. The walls protected against enemies while proclaiming the legitimacy of the Norman dynasty. Jung frequently reminded us that human beings do not live by reason alone. We are continually shaped by images, symbols, and emotions rooted deep within the unconscious. Perhaps the architects who designed the Tower of London never read Jung's writings. Yet through experience, they understood this truth remarkably well. They knew that ruling a city required more than soldiers. It also required symbols powerful enough to make others believe in your strength. Today, visitors who walk through the tower's ancient stone gates rarely experience the fear that someone might have felt 900 years ago. Yet the feeling of awe remains remarkably unchanged. The walls, several meters thick, the enclosed courtyards, and the towering White Tower still cause people to lift their eyes. Perhaps that is what truly great architecture always accomplishes. It changes not only the space around us, but also the emotions within us. Carl Gustav Jung wrote, "In memories, dreams, reflections, the least of things with a meaning is worth more in life than the greatest of things without it." Every stone of the Tower of London carries a meaning that extends far beyond its physical weight. These stones support more than walls. They uphold nearly 1,000 years of memories of authority, belief, hope, and fear. It is precisely that meaning which has allowed this fortress to outlive every king who ever ruled within it. As evening slowly settles over London, the ancient stone walls deepen into shades of silver grey beneath the moonlight. The still waters of the moat mirror the White Tower like an old reflection preserved by time itself. The sounds of modern traffic drift faintly from the city beyond. Yet within these walls, history seems to maintain its own quiet rhythm. And perhaps, as we pass silently through each successive gate, what unfolds before us is not merely an ancient fortress, but a profound lesson in how human beings have used architecture to shape emotion, strengthen authority, and create symbols capable of surviving almost an entire millennium. Perhaps that is why the Tower of London continues to stand not simply as a monument of stone, but as a collective dream built from history, memory, and the deepest layers of the human soul, a fortress of many purposes. If there is one place in the world where every wall has witnessed countless different roles in human history, the Tower of London is surely among the finest examples. As morning mist drifts lazily across the River Thames, it is difficult to imagine that behind these ancient stone walls, nearly every aspect of a medieval kingdom once unfolded simultaneously. This was not merely a residence for kings. It was home to soldiers standing watch, craftsmen striking coins, blacksmiths forging weapons, royal officials administering the kingdom, prisoners awaiting uncertain fates, and even extraordinary animals brought from distant lands. Perhaps the Tower of London was never simply a castle. It was a city in miniature, where power wore many faces. In the years immediately following the Norman conquest, the tower's foremost purpose was military. Its thick walls, watchtowers, and carefully planned defenses protected the new center of royal authority in England. From here, troops could oversee the City of London, command the vital shipping lanes along the River Thames, and respond rapidly to any sign of rebellion. Yet at the very same time, it also served as a royal palace. Today we tend to separate castles from palaces, one built for war, the other for royal comfort. But during the Middle Ages, those two purposes were inseparable. Norman and later Plantagenet kings lived within the chambers of the White Tower. They welcomed foreign ambassadors, hosted lavish feasts, debated affairs of state, and made decisions capable of changing the destiny of an entire kingdom. How remarkable that a single corridor could lead either to a throne room or to an armory, separated only by a few footsteps. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious, "The archetype is essentially an unconscious content that is altered by becoming conscious and by being perceived." Jung believed that human beings create symbols to express their deepest psychological realities. Perhaps the king's decision to live and govern from within the fortress carried symbolic meaning as well. It conveyed a powerful message. Authority and protection could not be separated. The king did not stand outside the fortress. He was its center. Yet perhaps the role that has made the Tower of London most famous is that of a prison. Across the centuries, it confined deposed kings, queens, noblemen, bishops, scholars, military commanders, and individuals accused of treason. What many people do not realize, however, is that not every prisoner experienced the tower in the same way. Some prisoners had private chambers, servants, books, writing desks, even small gardens. Others endured conditions of extraordinary hardship. That contrast reveals an important truth about medieval society. Social rank did not disappear simply because the prison gates closed behind someone. Beyond serving as a prison, the tower also functioned as the royal treasury. For centuries, England's greatest treasures were safeguarded within its strongest chambers. Gold, silver, important state documents, and eventually the magnificent crown jewels were all protected behind layers of massive stone walls. Perhaps nothing reveals the true nature of power more clearly than placing a throne and a treasury within the same fortress. Another role, less familiar to many visitors today, was that of the royal mint. For hundreds of years, England's coins were struck inside the Tower of London. This arrangement provided security, but it also reinforced an important idea. The value of the kingdom's currency rested upon the authority of the crown itself. A coin is never only metal, it is the trust of an entire nation. The tower also housed the royal armories, storing thousands of swords, spears, bows, cannons, and magnificent suits of armor, used both in warfare and ceremonial occasions. Over time, this remarkable collection became one of the foundations of Britain's military museums. Yet among all these solemn functions, the tower once possessed something that surprises many people: a royal menagerie. Beginning in the 13th century, English monarchs received remarkable diplomatic gifts from across the known world. Lions, leopards, elephants, even a polar bear once lived within the tower's grounds. These animals were never kept merely for entertainment. They were symbols of royal authority. For only a king of immense power could possess creatures from lands so distant that most of his subjects would never even imagine them. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in Man and His Symbols, "Man and his symbols show that it is possible for man to cooperate with the unconscious." According to Jung, symbols speak more powerfully than words. A lion roaming a royal fortress is never simply an animal. It embodies strength. An elephant represents wealth, global connections, and influence extending far beyond national borders. Without uttering a single speech, these extraordinary creatures told the king's subjects a compelling story about the reach of the English crown. Beyond all these responsibilities, the Tower of London also served during various periods as an administrative center of the kingdom. Important state documents were preserved here. Meetings of the Royal Council took place within its great halls. Officials, clerks, soldiers, craftsmen, priests, and servants all lived and worked together inside its walls. If you observe carefully, you begin to realize the Tower of London was never merely a place where people lived. It was the place where an entire kingdom was governed. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, "The least of things with a meaning is worth more in life than the greatest of things without it." Perhaps that meaning explains why the Tower of London has retained such a unique place in the imagination of the British people for nearly 1,000 years. It is not simply an ancient monument. It is the place where the most important functions of a nation once converged within a single space: war and peace, authority and imprisonment, wealth and sacrifice, ordinary daily life, and decisions that altered the course of history. Some buildings are constructed for a single purpose. The Tower of London was built to become the heart of an entire kingdom, and like the human heart itself, it was both powerful and vulnerable. It pumped the lifeblood of royal authority throughout the realm, yet it also preserved the pain, the losses, and the hopes of countless generations. As evening slowly descends, the final light of day brushes softly across walls darkened by centuries of time. Courtyards that once echoed with horses' hooves, chapel bells, ringing anvils, and the footsteps of kings now rest in profound silence. In that quiet moment, the tower no longer feels merely like a fortress or a palace. Instead, it resembles an enormous book written in stone, where every chamber forms a chapter, every gateway turns another page, and every century adds yet another layer of memory. Perhaps it is precisely because the tower has carried so many different purposes throughout its long existence that it tells not only the story of England, but the timeless story of how humanity builds power, preserves memory, and seeks permanence against the endless current of time. The crown jewels, perhaps nowhere within the Tower of London inspires such a mixture of admiration and quiet reflection as the chamber that houses the crown jewels. As you step inside, light dances across diamonds, rubies, emeralds, and solid gold, filling the room with an almost otherworldly brilliance. Yet if you linger long enough, you begin to realize that the true value of this collection does not lie in its extraordinary material worth. What makes these treasures priceless is the meaning carried by every object. They are not merely magnificent ornaments. They are symbols that have accompanied the history of England for centuries, passed carefully from one generation to the next as a silent language of authority, duty, and continuity. It is fascinating to imagine that a king or queen, before the moment of coronation, is simply another human being. Only during the ceremony, when each sacred object is placed into their hands, does their role truly change. In that carefully choreographed sequence of ancient rituals, an individual is transformed into the living symbol of an entire nation. Perhaps power does not begin with a person, it begins with the meaning a community chooses to give its symbols. At the heart of the crown jewels stands the crown itself. Across nearly every civilization, the crown has represented supreme authority. Yet in Britain, it carries an even deeper significance. The crown does not belong to the individual monarch who happens to wear it. Within the British constitutional tradition, the crown is also a legal institution, a continuing embodiment of the state itself. Kings and queens come and go, but the crown endures. It is a remarkable idea. People change, the symbol remains. The St. Edward's crown, used during the most sacred moment of the coronation ceremony, expresses this continuity more clearly than perhaps any other object. Although many earlier regalia were destroyed during the English Civil War in the 17th century, today's crown jewels continue traditions stretching back for centuries. Every coronation marks not merely the beginning of a new reign, but the affirmation that history itself has never truly been broken. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in Man and His Symbols, "Man and his symbols show that it is possible for man to cooperate with the unconscious." For Jung, Symbols allow human beings to connect with the deepest layers of the psyche and with values greater than personal existence. Perhaps the crown serves precisely this purpose. It does not merely represent authority, it reminds its wearer that they carry a responsibility greater than themselves. Beside the crown rests the scepter, the traditional symbol of sovereign authority. During the coronation, the monarch receives the scepter as a solemn commitment to administer justice and protect the kingdom. It is not a weapon, it is not intended for battle. It exists to remind us that power finds its highest purpose only when exercised with wisdom, responsibility, and restraint. Among the most celebrated treasures is the sovereign's scepter with cross, which today holds the magnificent Cullinan I diamond, one of the largest colorless cut diamonds ever produced. Its dazzling brilliance naturally captures every visitor's attention, yet its symbolic meaning extends far beyond its extraordinary beauty. It suggests that royal authority should always be illuminated by responsibility and faith. Alongside the scepter stand the ceremonial swords. Several different swords appear during the coronation service, each carrying its own symbolic meaning. Together they recall not only the military strength of the kingdom, but also justice, courage, mercy, and the monarch's obligation to defend the people. What is especially striking is that the sword does not merely represent victory, it reminds its bearer of the limits of power. A sovereign may possess the sword, but can never stand above the justice it represents. Nearby rests another remarkable object, the sovereign's orb. Fashioned from gold and crowned by a cross, the orb symbolizes the world under the sovereignty of God. During the coronation, it is presented to the monarch as a reminder that earthly authority must always remain guided by moral responsibility. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious, the symbols of the self arise in dreams, myths, and fairy tales. Jung observed that spherical symbols have long represented wholeness, unity, and cosmic order. Perhaps that explains why the sovereign's orb signifies far more than territory or political authority. It reflects the hope that power can serve harmony rather than domination. What makes the crown jewels so distinctive among the world's royal treasures is that they are not simply preserved behind glass. They are still used today. During the coronation of King Charles III in 2023, many of these same regalia fulfilled exactly the roles they had performed for centuries before. Because of this, the crown jewels are not merely relics of history. They remain living participants. In the present, perhaps, a tradition truly lives only when each generation continues to practice it. Why does Britain preserve such ceremonies in an age of advanced technology and constant change? Perhaps because human beings have always needed symbols that connect them with their past. Technology evolves, politics changes, generations rise and pass away. Yet ancient ceremonies remind a people that they remain part of a story that began long before they were born and will continue long after they are gone. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, "The least of things with a meaning is worth more in life than the greatest of things without it. A crown is only gold and jewels without history. A scepter is only metal without meaning. A sword is only steel without ideals." What makes these treasures truly priceless is not their materials, but the stories entrusted to them across the centuries. Standing before the crown jewels, it is easy to become captivated by the dazzling brilliance of the diamonds. Yet perhaps the most extraordinary sight is something far quieter, the patient endurance of time itself. How many kings have held that scepter? How many queens have worn That crown, how many generations have come and gone, while the symbols remain, continuing to tell the same story of duty, loyalty, and continuity. As night gradually settles over the Tower of London, the chambers housing the crown jewels sink gently into silence. The final rays of daylight shimmer across polished gemstones before fading softly into darkness. Beyond the ancient walls, the River Thames continues its timeless journey toward the sea, just as it has for countless centuries. Within the quiet vaults, the crown, the scepter, the ceremonial swords, and the sovereign's orb rest patiently, awaiting some future coronation still unwritten by history. And perhaps it is in that profound stillness that we discover the greatest treasure of all, not the power possessed by any individual ruler, but the remarkable ability of a civilization to preserve symbols that bind its past, its present, and its future into one unbroken story, gently carried forward through the endless passage of time. The greatest mysteries. If there is one story that forever wraps the Tower of London in a veil of mystery, it is surely the story of the princes in the tower, one of the most enduring and controversial disappearances in English history. More than 5 centuries have passed, yet the ancient stone walls remain silent, as though they still guard a secret that time itself has never been able to unlock. Some questions refuse to surrender to history, and sometimes it is that very silence that invites deeper reflection than any definitive answer ever could. In the spring of 1483, England mourned the death of King Edward IV. According to custom, his 12-year-old eldest son was to succeed him as King Edward V. His younger brother, Richard, Duke of York, was only about 9 years old, born into the very heart of a royal dynasty. The two boys seemed destined for lives of honor and ceremony. Instead, fate quietly led them toward one of history's greatest enigmas. Edward was brought to the Tower of London to prepare for his coronation. This was not unusual. For centuries, future monarchs had stayed within the tower before receiving their crown. A short time later, young Richard joined his brother. Contemporary accounts suggest that the two princes were seen playing together within the tower grounds. Then, they disappeared. No farewell, no trial, no decree, no witness, only silence. After the summer of that year, no reliable contemporary record confirms that the boys were ever seen alive again. Rumors spread through London. People whispered about the young princes who had simply vanished. Meanwhile, their uncle, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, accepted the crown and became King Richard III. It was at that moment that history stepped into the realm of uncertainty. Did Richard III order the deaths of his nephews to secure his throne, or was someone else responsible, acting within a political conspiracy that history has never fully uncovered? Or perhaps something even stranger happened. Did the princes really die inside the tower, or were they secretly taken somewhere else? For more than 500 years, no answer has ever been universally accepted. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious. The archetype is essentially an unconscious content that is altered by becoming conscious and by being perceived. Jung believed that humanity continually reenacts certain archetypal stories throughout history. The tale of the two princes is one of those enduring patterns. Innocent children caught within the ambitions of powerful adults. The same image appears throughout mythology, fairy tales, sacred stories, and real history alike. Because every age has known moments when innocence must face ambition. What makes this story so haunting is not its violence, it is that no one knows what truly happened. In 1674, nearly 2 centuries after the disappearance, workers dismantling an old staircase within the White Tower uncovered the remains of two small skeletons buried beneath the stonework. King Charles II believed they belonged to Edward V and Richard. The remains were transferred to Westminster Abbey, where they received a royal burial. It seemed the mystery had ended. Instead, it had only entered another chapter. In 1933, the remains were examined by specialists. Their analysis suggested that the bones belonged to two children of approximately the right ages to be the missing princes. Yet the condition of the remains prevented any definitive conclusion. Even today, comprehensive modern DNA testing has never been carried out with royal approval. So, no one can prove they were the princes, and no one can completely dismiss that possibility. History often resembles a room illuminated by only a single candle. We see a few corners clearly, while most remains hidden in shadow. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." It is one of Jung's most profound ideas. Human beings do not mature simply by contemplating what is bright and comforting. We grow by confronting the darker places within history, within society, and within ourselves. Perhaps the mystery of the princes still exists, not because we must forever seek a murderer, but because it reminds us that power always carries a cost. For centuries, Richard III was widely portrayed as the architect of the prince's disappearance, especially after William Shakespeare immortalized that image in his play Richard III. Yet modern historians approach the evidence far more cautiously. Many recognize that much of the surviving narrative was written under the Tudor dynasty, whose political legitimacy benefited from portraying Richard as a tyrant. Other theories point instead toward Henry VII, founder of the Tudor dynasty. Still others argue that the evidence simply remains insufficient to identify any suspect with certainty. What is remarkable is that, after more than 500 years, this mystery continues to be investigated through archaeology, historical scholarship, forensic science, and advances in genetic analysis. Yet, the more technology improves, the farther the answer sometimes seems to drift away. Perhaps history was never meant to surrender every secret. Some mysteries exist only to remind humanity to remain humble before time. Jung often suggested that the unconscious forever contains regions beyond complete understanding. A part of every human being will always live beside questions that cannot be fully answered. Perhaps history is no different. Not every door needs to be opened. Not every silence must be filled. Sometimes it is uncertainty that allows a story to live longer than any final answer ever could. As night settles over the Tower of London, the ancient stone walls seem to absorb the sounds of the modern city beyond them. The distant traffic fades into the darkness, leaving only the soft whisper of the wind through narrow windows and the occasional call of the ravens echoing across the old courtyard. If anything still lingers within those weathered stones, perhaps it is not only the memory of two lost children, but also humanity's enduring fascination with the unanswered questions history leaves behind. And perhaps that silence is the tower's truest inheritance, not merely a place that preserves what is known, but one that faithfully guards its mysteries, inviting every generation to pause, to listen, to wonder, and ultimately to search for its own answers within the quiet depths of history and within the hidden chambers of the human soul. Queens who walk toward death. As night gradually settles over the grey stone walls of the Tower of London, a place that witnessed royal coronations and some of the most glorious moments in English history, it is difficult to imagine that the small enclosed lawn, known as Tower Green, also became the final destination of some of the most powerful women in the kingdom. Their lives did not end on distant battlefields or amid violent rebellions. Instead, they ended in the almost complete silence of a quiet morning within the very fortress built to protect the crown itself. Perhaps nowhere in English history reveals the fragility of power more clearly than the Tower of London. For centuries, kings and queens lived surrounded by luxury. They wore magnificent crowns, commanded armies, and were honored by their subjects. Yet history continually reminds us that power is never a permanent refuge. Sometimes, only one shift in politics is enough to transform a monarch into a prisoner. There are paths that led not toward victory, but toward an ending written within the palace itself. The first of these stories belongs to Anne Boleyn, a woman who altered the course of English history in ways few could ever have imagined. She was not merely the second wife of Henry VIII. It was Henry's determination to marry Anne that ultimately led England to break with the authority of the Roman Catholic Church and establish the independent Church of England. Yet only a few years after becoming queen, Anne was accused of adultery, treason, and incest. Today, most historians believe those accusations were supported far more by politics than by convincing evidence. On 19 May 1536, Anne Boleyn walked to the scaffold at Tower Green. She did not cry out. She did not resist. She did not beg. According to several contemporary accounts, Anne displayed extraordinary composure during her final moments. Before her execution, she declared, "I pray God save the king and send him long to reign over you." These were the remarkably calm final words of a woman who had once occupied the highest place in England. Even as death approached, she offered a prayer for the king himself. Perhaps that was not only courage, it was also acceptance of what could no longer be changed. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." The phrase often attributed to Jung, "What you resist persists," does not actually appear in his published works, and should not be treated as an authentic quotation. The passage above, however, expresses a similar philosophical spirit. Perhaps Anne Boleyn faced the darkness of her fate with precisely that rare form of conscious acceptance. Only 6 years later, another woman walked the same path. Her name was Catherine Howard, Henry VIII's fifth wife. She was far younger than Anne, almost still a teenager when she became queen. Yet youth could not protect her from the dangerous intrigues of the Tudor court. After details of relationships from her earlier life became known, Catherine too was charged with treason. On 13 February 1542, she was executed at Tower Green. A long-preserved tradition claims that, on the night before her death, Catherine repeatedly practiced placing her head upon the execution block so that she might face the following morning with dignity. No one knows whether that story is entirely true, yet the fact that it has survived for centuries reveals something about humanity. We continually seek to understand another person's fear. If Anne and Catherine had both worn the crown of Queen Consort, Lady Jane Grey occupies an even more tragic place in English history. She is remembered as the 9 Days Queen, having reigned for only about 9 days in 1553. Jane never actively sought the throne. Instead, she became a pawn in the struggle between powerful nobles. Following the death of Edward VI, when Mary Tudor successfully claimed the crown, Jane was imprisoned within the Tower of London. The irony could hardly have been greater. The same place where she had once arrived in preparation for a coronation became the place where her life would end. On 12 February 1554, Lady Jane Grey was executed at only 16 or 17 years of age. History can be especially cruel to the young. They often have little chance to choose their own destiny, yet still must bear the consequences of decisions made by others. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious, the archetype is essentially an unconscious content that is altered by becoming conscious and by being perceived. Perhaps the image of the young queen sacrificed to political power has become one of humanity's enduring archetypes. It appears not only in English history but throughout mythology, literature, and many different cultures. Yet among these stories that ended upon the scaffold, one follows an entirely different path. It is the story of Elizabeth I. In 1554, during the reign of her half-sister, Mary I, Elizabeth was suspected of involvement in Wyatt's rebellion and was imprisoned in the Tower. As her barge arrived at the landing stairs, Elizabeth is traditionally said to have declared, "Here landeth as true a subject, being prisoner, as ever landed at these stairs." Even while treated as a suspected traitor, she affirmed her loyalty to the crown. Elizabeth remained within the Tower for several long weeks. No one could know whether she believed she would ever become queen. Yet only a few years later, after Mary's death, Elizabeth ascended the throne and began one of the most celebrated reigns in English history. The woman who had once been a prisoner became the symbol of an entire golden age. Perhaps this is one of history's most beautiful paradoxes. The Tower was not only a place where destinies ended, sometimes it also became the place where new ones quietly began. From a historical perspective, the executions carried out within the Tower of London were never intended merely to punish individuals. They were political messages delivered to an entire kingdom. Each execution reinforced the authority of the reigning monarch and reminded subjects that ultimate power rested with the crown. During periods when dynastic legitimacy was constantly challenged, such public acts served as powerful demonstrations of political control. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in Man and His Symbols, "Man and his symbols show that it is possible for man to cooperate with the unconscious." For Jung, rituals possess profound symbolic force. The public executions of medieval and early modern Europe were not simply legal procedures. They were ceremonies of power, carefully staged to shape the collective mind and strengthen the belief that order would endure. Today, Tower Green is simply a peaceful lawn. A modest memorial marks the place where those remarkable women took their final steps. Birds still sing among the branches overhead. Gentle winds continue to move softly across the weathered stone walls. There are no longer drums, no shouting crowds, no executioner's axe, only silence and memory. Perhaps this is the quiet lesson the Tower of London has been offering for nearly 1,000 years. Power may lift a human being to extraordinary heights, yet it can also strip everything away within the span of a single morning. Beyond every political victory and every dynastic defeat, what endures longest is neither triumph nor failure, but the memory of those who faced their destiny with dignity and courage. And beneath the gentle night that now settles over Tower Green, the ancient stones seem no longer to tell the stories of kings alone. Instead, they speak softly of the fragile nature of every human life. Before the passage of time, a lesson at once humble, enduring, and deeply moving, still echoing through nearly a millennium of history. Famous prisoners. If the walls of the Tower of London could speak, Perhaps they would not begin by telling us about kings or glittering treasures. Instead, they would speak of the men and women who once looked out through narrow windows, quietly counted the footsteps of guards, echoing along cold corridors, and waited for judgments that sometimes arrived without warning or never seemed certain to arrive at all. For throughout nearly 1,000 years of history, the Tower was not merely a symbol of royal authority. It became the place where countless human destinies intersected with history itself. What makes its story remarkable is that many of its prisoners were not criminals in the ordinary sense. They were scholars, nobles, bishops, explorers, statesmen, and even kings. That is what makes the Tower of London unlike almost any other prison in history. Perhaps the most fearsome prison is not the one that confines criminals, but the one that confines those who change history. Among its most famous prisoners was Sir Thomas More, a brilliant scholar, respected lawyer, and Lord Chancellor of England. More had once been one of King Henry VIII's most trusted advisors. Yet when Henry broke with the Roman Catholic Church and established the Church of England, Thomas More refused to swear the oath, recognizing the king as the supreme head of the new church. His refusal did not come from ambition, it came from conviction. In 1534, More was imprisoned within the Tower of London, where he remained for more than a year before being convicted of treason. On 6 July 1535, he walked to the scaffold. Before his execution, he spoke words that have echoed through history ever since. "I die the king's good servant, but God's first." Perhaps within those 11 simple words, Thomas More left a lesson that transcends every age. There are values for which some people will surrender, even their lives. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Perhaps Thomas More confronted the darkness of his own fate with the serenity of a man whose conscience remained at peace. Another name forever linked with the Tower is Guy Fawkes. In 1605, together with his fellow conspirators, he participated in the Gunpowder Plot, an attempt to destroy the Houses of Parliament and assassinate King James I. The plot failed. Guy Fawkes was arrested and brought to the Tower. There he was interrogated and tortured under the king's authority. His signature, preserved before and after those interrogations, still survives today. Simply comparing those two signatures is enough to reveal the terrible suffering he endured. Some historical documents need very few words. A single, shaking signature can tell an entire tragedy. If Guy Fawkes represents political resistance, then Sir Walter Raleigh represents the spirit of exploration. An explorer, writer, soldier, and favorite of Queen Elizabeth I, Raleigh helped expand England's influence across the Atlantic world. Yet after James I came to the throne, Raleigh fell from royal favor and spent approximately 13 years imprisoned within the Tower. Curiously, those years behind bars became among the most creative of his life. While imprisoned, Raleigh wrote much of his monumental work, The History of the World. He also conducted scientific experiments and tended a small garden within the Tower grounds. Perhaps freedom does not always depend upon stone walls. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in Man and His Symbols, "Man and his symbols show that it is possible for man to cooperate with the unconscious. Even within imprisonment, human beings retain the ability to create, reflect, and discover meaning. Perhaps the widest space no prison can ever confine is the human mind." Throughout the centuries, the Tower also held several Scottish kings captured during conflicts between England and Scotland. Men who had once commanded thousands of soldiers, suddenly became prisoners within stone walls. History sometimes reverses every role more quickly than people can understand. Not only Scottish rulers, but also French nobles, bishops, diplomats, and influential political figures from across Europe found themselves imprisoned here. The Tower was never simply a criminal prison. It was a prison of power, where political, religious, and diplomatic conflicts left their deepest marks. Even in the 20th century, the Tower continued to witness remarkable chapters of history. During the Second World War, Rudolf Hess, deputy Führer of Nazi Germany, was briefly imprisoned there following his extraordinary solo flight to Scotland in 1941. The presence of one of Nazi Germany's highest-ranking leaders within the Tower demonstrated that the fortress still carried immense symbolic importance. After nearly 9 centuries, it is remarkable that a fortress built by the Normans continued to receive figures who shaped the 20th century. Even the infamous Kray twins, London's notorious gangsters of the 20th century, spent a brief period confined in the Tower during their military service after disciplinary offences. It is only a small historical detail, yet it reminds us that the Tower continued to appear across many different chapters of British history, from the Middle Ages into modern times. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious, "The archetype is essentially an unconscious content that is altered by becoming conscious and by being perceived. Perhaps the image of the prisoner is one of humanity's oldest archetypes. Yet, within the Tower of London, that archetype acquires an even deeper meaning. Those imprisoned here lost more than their freedom. They were forced to confront their beliefs, their fears, and the choices that had led them to these walls. Some lost everything. Some were eventually vindicated. Some entered history not because they triumphed, but because of the dignity with which they faced defeat. Perhaps this is what makes the prison chambers of the Tower so extraordinary. They preserve more than the names of famous captives. They preserve the moments when human character becomes most clearly visible, when power, status, and reputation have all been stripped away. What remains is character, and perhaps that is the one thing no prison can ever place. In chains, as darkness settles over the ancient stone walls, the small windows through which prisoners once gazed toward the distant sky now reflect only the pale glow of the moon. The footsteps of guards have long since faded into history, yet the feelings of waiting, hoping, questioning, and enduring seem somehow still woven into every weathered stone. Perhaps the Tower of London did more than imprison people. It quietly preserved stories of choice, courage, conscience, faith, and the remarkable human ability to protect one's dignity even after freedom had disappeared. And that may be why, after nearly 1,000 years, the Tower remains not merely a historic monument, but a silent mirror reflecting the deepest complexities of the human soul. Life inside the prison. When people think of the Tower of London as a prison, they often imagine dark underground cells, cold stone walls, and the echo of iron chains fading into the night. Yet if history teaches us anything, it is that reality is usually far more complex than imagination. Throughout nearly 1,000 years, the Tower of London was never the same prison for everyone. Behind those same stone walls, some prisoners lived in spacious chambers with fireplaces, writing desks, and personal servants. Others were left with nothing but damp walls, a narrow window, and an endless wait whose ending they could never predict. Perhaps every door closed for everyone. But what waited beyond it was never the same. Noblemen, bishops, senior officials, and members of the royal family were often treated very differently from ordinary prisoners. Many occupied private rooms, were permitted to keep books, clothing, and personal possessions, and could even hire servants if they were wealthy enough to pay for them. Some were allowed to walk through designated parts of the tower, provided they remained under constant guard. Poorer prisoners, or those convicted of more serious crimes, often faced a far harsher existence. Damp chambers, little natural light, and continual hardship transformed each passing day into its own quiet struggle. It is curious, freedom can disappear in a single moment, yet status can remain long afterward, even behind bars. This reflected an enduring reality of medieval and early modern society. Prisons did not exist outside the social order. They mirrored the very society that created them. Yet regardless of wealth or rank, almost every prisoner eventually confronted the same adversary: time. Inside a prison, time seems to move according to a different rhythm. There were no meetings of parliament, no crowded marketplaces, no long voyages across distant seas, only the chapel bell, the footsteps of guards pacing the corridors, and the slow movement of sunlight across a tiny window. Some counted days, some counted seasons, some eventually forgot how long they had already remained. Perhaps that is why so many prisoners searched for simple ways to preserve evidence of their own existence. They carved into stone. Today, visitors walking through the tower's historic prison chambers can still see hundreds of inscriptions, names, dates, prayers, religious symbols, and crosses deeply engraved into the ancient walls. These carvings were never acts of vandalism. They were declarations that whispered, "I was here." Some carved only their names. Others carved dates. Some etched religious symbols. Others left only a few brief words, as though sending a quiet message into the future. Those marks have survived for centuries, becoming among the most moving historical records the tower possesses. Without lengthy chronicles, a handful of rough scratches in stone can tell the story of profound loneliness. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in Man and His Symbols, "Man and his symbols show that it is possible for man to cooperate with the unconscious." According to Jung, human beings naturally express their inner worlds through symbols. Perhaps the carvings inside the tower are symbols in exactly that sense. They preserve more than names. They preserve hope, faith, and the longing not to be forgotten. Some prisoners chose another path. They wrote books. The most celebrated example is Sir Walter Raleigh. During his long imprisonment, he devoted much of his time to writing the history of the world. Remarkably, one of the 17th century's most ambitious historical works was conceived behind prison walls. Perhaps the body may be confined, but the mind need not. A prison removes the freedom to travel. Sometimes it grants something else: silence. Within that silence, many prisoners found themselves reflecting upon history, life, faith, and their own identities. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Perhaps solitude forced these prisoners to encounter the deepest parts of themselves. Without the noise of the outside world, only one conversation remained: the conversation with oneself. Some fortunate prisoners were even permitted to cultivate small gardens. At first, that seems almost impossible. A garden Inside, a prison. Yet for many, a few flowers or medicinal herbs became the final thread, connecting them to ordinary life. To care for a plant was to believe tomorrow would still arrive. Each new leaf quietly reminded its keeper that life continues, even behind stone walls. Yet perhaps the hardest burden was not the prison chamber itself. It was waiting. Some prisoners knew the exact day of their execution. Others waited for months. Some waited for years, never knowing whether they would be released or die. That uncertainty could become heavier than any sentence. Human beings can endure great suffering, but uncertainty is often harder still. Jung repeatedly observed that humanity's deepest fears often arise not from reality itself, but from the unknown. Inside the enclosed world of the tower, each passing day became a quiet test of the mind. Perhaps that is why many prisoners turned toward prayer. Some immersed themselves in books, some wrote, some carved. Stone, each sought to create meaning so that time itself would not become an empty void. A quotation frequently attributed to Carl Gustav Jung states, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Although this sentence is widely associated with Jung, scholars have not confirmed it as a verbatim quotation from his published works. Nevertheless, it reflects an important theme throughout his psychology. People often come to understand themselves most deeply when confronted by life's greatest trials. Perhaps a prison, in its own strange way, forces many people to meet themselves. No titles, no power, no audience, only a human being standing face to face with conscience and time. Today, the prison chambers of the Tower of London form part of a museum. Visitors walk slowly along stone corridors, pause before centuries-old inscriptions carved into the walls, and try to imagine the lives of those who occupied these rooms long ago. The iron keys no longer turn each night. The guards' heavy footsteps have faded into history. Only silence remains, resting gently upon stones, weathered by centuries. And perhaps it is within that silence that the tower whispers one of its gentlest and most enduring lessons. Human dignity is not measured by where we stand when life is easy, but by how faithfully we preserve hope after every door has closed. The carvings left in stone, the books written in solitude, and the small gardens patiently tended behind prison walls, all testify to the same enduring truth. Even in places built for confinement, the human spirit continues searching for ways to bloom. And perhaps that is the greatest legacy these ancient prison chambers have carried through nearly 1,000 years of history. A quiet reminder that while walls may imprison the body, they need never imprison the soul. Executions at the Tower. As night gradually settles over the Tower of London, the courtyards that once echoed with the sound of horses' hooves and chapel bells now rest in quiet stillness. A gentle breeze slips across stone walls that have stood for nearly 1,000 years, carrying a sense of peace far removed from the events these stones once witnessed. For centuries, the Tower of London was not only a residence for kings, nor merely the guardian of England's greatest treasures. It was also the place where many human lives reached their final chapter through ceremonies prepared with remarkable care, solemnity, and symbolism. Perhaps the history of executions at the Tower is not truly a story about death. It is a story about how a society understood power, honor, responsibility, and human dignity in life's final moments. Today, when people think of executions at the Tower of London, they usually picture Tower Green, the small grassy enclosure hidden deep within the fortress grounds. It is difficult to imagine that this peaceful place once witnessed the final moments of Anne Boleyn, Catherine Howard, and Lady Jane Grey. Why were people of such high rank executed here instead of before the crowds outside? The answer lies within the social structure of medieval and early modern England. Most people sentenced to death were taken to Tower Hill, just beyond the fortress walls, where large public crowds could witness the execution. These public executions served two purposes. They fulfilled the law, and they warned the entire kingdom. But members of the royal family and the highest ranks of the nobility were treated differently. They were taken inside Tower Green, not to lessen their sentence, but to preserve their dignity and to avoid the chaos of a crowd. Even in death, social status remained visible. Those who had once been queens, great nobles, or high officials were not led before thousands of curious spectators. Instead, they left the world within a more private setting, surrounded only by a small number of officials, clergy, guards, and necessary witnesses. Perhaps power may disappear, yet honor can still be preserved until the final moment. One of the most striking aspects of executions at Tower Green is how different they were from modern popular imagination. There were no roaring crowds, no prolonged spectacle. Instead, each execution followed an ordered sequence of carefully observed rituals. The condemned were usually permitted to pray, to meet a priest, to speak their final words, and in many cases, they even forgave the executioner before the sentence was carried out. These rituals reflected one of the deepest beliefs of Christian Europe. Death was not considered the absolute end. It was understood as the passage toward another judgment. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Perhaps no moment forces a person to confront that inner darkness more completely than the final hours of life, when titles, power, and wealth lose all meaning. Only conscience remains, along with the way one chooses to face the end. One aspect that continues to move historians is the remarkable composure shown by many of those who climbed the scaffold. Anne Boleyn, Catherine Howard, Lady Jane Grey, Thomas More, each carried a different story, yet each tried to preserve dignity in life's final moments. That does not mean they felt no fear. Human beings naturally fear death. Yet amid that fear, many displayed an extraordinary calm. Perhaps they understood. There are things we cannot choose, but we can always choose how we meet them. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in Man and His Symbols, "Man and his symbols show that it is possible for man to cooperate with the unconscious." Jung believed that rituals exist for more than tradition alone. They help human beings confront life's greatest transitions within a framework that carries meaning. Perhaps that is why even executions were surrounded by ceremony. The ritual was not only for the one about to die, it also belonged to those who remained, because rituals transform private grief into collective memory. If Tower Green represented the executions of the highest ranks, then Tower Hill served a different purpose entirely. Executions there unfolded before large public audiences. Crowds gathered from early morning to witness the sentence being carried out. These events functioned not only as legal punishments but also as political demonstrations. The state wished everyone to witness what happened to those who challenged the existing order. Viewed through modern eyes, Such practices may seem harsh or unsettling, yet within the historical context of those centuries, authority depended not only upon laws but also upon symbols visible to everyone. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious. The archetype is essentially an unconscious content that is altered by becoming conscious and by being perceived. A public execution became precisely such a symbol. It reached into the deeper layers of collective psychology, where people learned to distinguish between order and disorder, loyalty and betrayal, authority and rebellion. Yet, history possesses a remarkable irony. Many who were executed have lived far longer in humanity's memory than those who ordered their deaths. Time has an extraordinary way of reshaping the past. Judgments once accepted without question are sometimes revisited with compassion. Individuals once condemned as traitors are occasionally remembered as people who remained faithful to conscience above power. History cannot erase what happened, but it always leaves room for each generation to ask again, who truly won? Perhaps victory belongs not to those who lived longer, but to those who left behind the deeper meaning. Jung often observed that humanity's most powerful symbols survive long after the age that created them has disappeared. Perhaps Tower Green has become one of those symbols. Today it is simply a small lawn marked by a modest glass memorial. The scaffold is gone. The executioner's axe has vanished. The ceremonies have ended. Only the wind crosses the grass, and silence remains. Yet perhaps that silence speaks more eloquently than any speech ever could. It reminds us that power, however immense, cannot overcome time. Kings, queens, nobles, and ministers have all become part of history. Only the ancient stone walls remain, faithful witnesses to nearly 1,000 years of human ambition, triumph, and loss. And perhaps, as we walk slowly across Tower Green, beneath the fading evening light, what lingers in the heart is not the memory of death itself. It is a renewed appreciation for life, for courage, and for human dignity. Because in the end, history does not preserve the executioner's axe. It preserves the way people met their fate. In the quiet night that now settles over London, as the wind softly brushes the weathered stones of the tower, Tower Green no longer feels like a place defined by executions. Instead, it has become a place of reflection, a quiet space, where power, time, and the enduring strength of the human spirit continue their silent conversation across the centuries. Mysteries and legends. As the sun slowly disappears behind the historic rooftops of London and the final rays of daylight linger upon the grey stone walls of the Tower of London, the fortress begins to take on a different atmosphere. The visitors have gone, footsteps fade into silence. Only the gentle wind moving past the watchtowers, the distant bells of the city, and, now and then, the deep call of a raven echo across the quiet air. Perhaps it is in moments like these that one begins to understand why the Tower of London is remembered not only for its history, but also for the legends that have quietly accompanied it through the centuries. Some truths are written in chronicles, others are preserved through belief. One of the most enduring legends surrounding the tower concerns its ravens. According to a tradition passed down for generations, if the ravens were ever to leave the Tower of London, the Kingdom of England would fall and the monarchy would come to an end. No one knows exactly when this story began. Some historians believe it became widespread during the reign of King Charles II in the 17th century. Others suggest its roots may reach even further back, drawing upon Celtic and Norse traditions in which ravens held deep symbolic meaning. Whatever its origin, the important question is not whether, it is literally true, but that generations have believed. In it, Carl Gustav Jung wrote in Man and His Symbols, "Man and his symbols show that it is possible for man to cooperate with the unconscious." To Jung, symbols formed a bridge between the visible world and the deepest layers of the human mind. Across many cultures, ravens have long carried powerful meanings. Sometimes they represent death, sometimes wisdom, sometimes messengers between worlds. And here, at the tower, they have become symbols of continuity. Even today, this tradition is taken seriously. The tower always keeps at least 6 ravens, usually with 1 additional bird as a reserve. These birds are not entirely wild. To prevent them from wandering too far, part of one wing is carefully trimmed, allowing them to fly short distances while remaining within the tower grounds. To many modern visitors, this practice raises understandable questions, yet the ravens today are cared for under strict animal welfare standards. They receive specialized diets, veterinary care, and carefully maintained living conditions. It is remarkable that a nation devotes such care to a handful of ravens, not because they are rare, but because they carry a story. The person responsible for their care bears a unique title, the Raven Master. It is more than a job. It is almost a calling. The Raven Master knows each bird's personality, monitors its health, prepares its meals, and ensures the flock is well cared for. Every raven has its own name, its own habits, its own distinct character. Some are playful, some are calm, some enjoy human company, others prefer solitude. Watching them wander slowly across the ancient lawns of the tower, it becomes difficult to separate legend from reality. Perhaps after centuries, the two have quietly become one. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious, "The archetype is essentially an unconscious content that is altered by becoming conscious and by being perceived." Perhaps the tower's ravens have themselves become a modern archetype, a symbol understood not only through reason but also through intuition. They remind us of continuity, of memory, and of the belief that some traditions deserve to endure. Yet if the ravens are the soul of the tower, then the ceremony of the keys is surely its heartbeat. This nightly ritual of locking the tower has continued with astonishing consistency for more than 7 centuries. Historical records indicate that it has been performed continuously since at least the 14th century. Only in extraordinarily rare circumstances, such as during the bombing of London in the Second World War, has it ever been delayed. And even then, only by a few minutes. Every evening, at precisely the appointed hour, the gates are locked, not because an enemy waits outside, as in centuries past, but because a tradition still lives. The ceremony begins when the chief yeoman warder, dressed in traditional uniform, carries a lantern and the sovereign's keys toward the main gate. On the way, a sentry challenges him. The dialogue has remained almost unchanged for generations. "Halt! Who comes there?" "The keys." "Whose keys?" "King Charles's keys." The response changes with the reigning monarch. Finally, the sentry replies, "Pass then. All's well." Only a few simple words, repeated across hundreds of years. How many kings have come and gone? How many wars have ended? Yet those same words continue to echo, almost unchanged. Perhaps that is the miracle of tradition. Jung frequently emphasized that rituals provide continuity between generations. Although he never wrote specifically about the ceremony of the keys, his broader ideas suggest that rituals connect communities to the deeper layers of collective memory. a ritual, exists, not only to remember the past, but to remind the present that it belongs to a story far greater than itself. Today, millions of visitors arrive to admire the tower's ancient walls, the magnificent crown jewels, or the towering White Tower. Yet after nightfall, these famous attractions seem to retreat into the background. Only the footsteps of the yeoman warder remain, a small lantern, the calls of ravens returning to their roosts, and a ceremony that has endured for centuries. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, "The least of things with a meaning is worth more in life than the greatest of things without it." Perhaps an old ring of keys, a handful of ravens, and a ceremony lasting only a few minutes possess little value if viewed through a purely practical lens. Yet, through the eyes of history, they become priceless symbols. They remind us that a civilization is preserved not only through magnificent buildings or military victories, but also through small acts faithfully repeated by one generation after another. And as night fully embraces the Tower of London, the ravens settle quietly among the ancient trees. The great stone gates close once more with keys that have passed through countless hands across the centuries. Beyond the walls, modern London continues to sparkle with movement and light. Inside, however, time seems to walk according to an older rhythm. Perhaps it is this remarkable union of legend and history that has made the Tower of London something greater than a historic monument. It has become a living home for collective memory, a place where symbols continue telling their stories in the stillness of the night, and where people from every generation can still feel the quiet power of belief, tradition, and those enduring things that outlast even our own lives. The Royal Menagerie. When most people think of the Tower of London, they picture mighty stone walls, kings and queens, famous prisoners, or the dazzling crown jewels, glowing beneath carefully placed lights. Yet hidden within its long history lies another chapter, gentler, quieter, and filled with wonder. It is remarkable to imagine that for centuries this formidable fortress also housed a royal menagerie, where extraordinary animals from distant lands lived within the heart of medieval London. Perhaps it was one of history's most beautiful intersections of power, nature, and humanity's endless curiosity. Imagine a morning more than 7 centuries ago. Within those cold stone walls, there were not only the footsteps of guards, but also the roar of lions, the trumpet of elephants, and the splash of a polar bear. The historical record tells us that during the early 13th century, under the reigns of King John and especially Henry III, the Tower of London gradually became home to an extraordinary collection of exotic animals. These creatures were not gathered for scientific study, as animals are in modern zoos. Instead, they arrived as diplomatic gifts. Kings, princes, and distant rulers presented them to England's monarchs as symbols of friendship, respect, or political alliance. In the medieval world, a lion was valuable, not only because of its strength, but because it reflected the power of the ruler who possessed it. Every animal that entered the tower therefore carried a story far greater than itself. They became silent ambassadors of diplomacy, revealing relationships between kingdoms during an age when a remarkable gift could sometimes speak more powerfully than any written treaty. One of the most famous residents of the royal menagerie was a polar bear. Historical records tell us that in 1252, King Haakon IV of Norway presented Henry III with this rare white bear. What makes the story especially memorable is that the animal was not confined entirely within an enclosure. Instead, it was kept on a long chain and allowed to descend to the River Thames, where it could swim and catch fish. Imagine that extraordinary scene: a polar bear swimming through the Thames, while wooden riverboats passed quietly nearby. For the people of medieval London, it must have been an unforgettable sight. Today, such a scene seems almost impossible, yet in the Middle Ages, it formed part of royal life. Another extraordinary resident was an African elephant. In 1255, King Louis IX of France presented Henry III with an elephant, a creature that most people in England had never seen before. Artists, scholars, and ordinary citizens visited the tower simply to see an animal from a world beyond their imagination. Some of the earliest drawings of this elephant helped Europeans better understand the lands that existed beyond their own continent. In that sense, the elephant became more than a diplomatic gift. It became a living lesson in geography, nature, and discovery. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in Man and His Symbols, "Man and his symbols show that it is possible for man to cooperate with the unconscious." According to Jung, human beings are naturally drawn towards symbols that extend beyond ordinary experience. Perhaps these remarkable animals awakened something deep within the imagination. They represented unknown lands, long journeys, and humanity's desire to explore a larger world. The royal menagerie also housed lions, animals long associated with courage, strength, and kingship. Since lions already appeared upon the royal arms of England, keeping living lions inside the tower carried profound symbolic importance. A lion was not merely an animal, it was a declaration of royal authority. Alongside the lions lived leopards, lynxes, and other remarkable creatures arriving from Africa, the Middle East, and across Europe. Together they transformed the tower into something truly unusual. A place where political history met the astonishing diversity of the natural world. One surprising detail is that many of these animals appear to have received better care than modern audiences often imagine. Naturally, medieval standards of animal welfare differed greatly from those of today. Yet surviving financial records show that the Crown allocated funds for food, caretakers, and specially constructed enclosures suited to different species. Perhaps even power desired to surround itself with the beauty of nature. Over time, the royal menagerie grew increasingly popular, attracting visitors from across London. Yet as scientific understanding expanded during the 18th and 19th centuries, people's attitudes toward keeping wild animals gradually changed. Humanity no longer wanted only to admire rare creatures. People wanted to understand them, to study their behavior, their habitats, and their place within nature. This shift in thinking eventually led to the birth of the modern zoological garden. In 1828, the London Zoo opened under the care of the Zoological Society of London, and many animals formerly housed within the tower were transferred there. In that sense, the royal menagerie of the tower became an important predecessor of London's modern zoo. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious. The archetype is essentially an unconscious content that is altered by becoming conscious and by being perceived. Perhaps extraordinary animals have always functioned as archetypal symbols within the human imagination. They represent that untamed part of nature toward which people continue reaching, even while living within crowded cities. Today, the royal menagerie no longer exists. The lions no longer roar across the ancient walls. The elephant no longer walks slowly across the courtyard. The polar bear no longer swims in the Thames. Yet if we listen carefully in the quiet of evening, perhaps we can still imagine those sounds echoing through time. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in Memories, Dreams, Reflections. The least of things with a meaning is worth more in life than the greatest of things without it. Perhaps what remains after so many centuries is not the cages or the footprints of the animals themselves, but the meaning they carried. They remind us that history is shaped not only by wars, treaties, and struggles for power. It is also woven from encounters between civilizations, from humanity's curiosity about the natural world, and from our enduring desire to discover horizons larger than ourselves. And as night gently settles over the Tower of London, the courtyards, once inhabited by lions, elephants, leopards, and polar bears, fall silent beneath the ancient sky. The River Thames continues its timeless journey, just as it has for hundreds of years. Somewhere within the memory of these old stone walls, perhaps the footsteps of creatures from distant continents still quietly linger. And perhaps that is why the Tower of London remains more than a fortress of kings. It has also become a monument to humanity's spirit of exploration, a place where kingdoms met distant worlds, where diplomacy walked beside wonder, and where the endless beauty of nature found an unexpected home within walls built for power. The Royal Mint and the armories. When most people think of the Tower of London, they picture ancient stone walls, kings and queens, famous executions, and mysterious legends that have endured for nearly 1,000 years. Yet behind that quiet grandeur lies another story, one mentioned less often, but one that helped shape an empire. It is the story of the Royal Mint, where England's coins were struck for centuries. The story of vast armories filled with weapons. And the story of the White Tower, which once safeguarded the military strength of the kingdom. If the palace symbolized royal authority, then money and arms were the two quiet pillars that allowed that authority to endure. Perhaps history is not written only by battles or treaties. It is also forged in small coins and protected by silent storehouses hidden behind stone walls. Some empires are built with swords, but they are sustained by currency people trust. From the Middle Ages onward, the Tower of London became home to the Royal Mint, England's most important mint for many centuries. Its location inside the fortress was no accident. Money has always been inseparable from power. A coin possesses value not merely because of the metal from which it is made, but because people believe in the authority that issued it. Every coin carried the portrait of a king or queen, quietly declaring that royal authority was present in every everyday exchange. For centuries, millions of silver and gold coins were struck within these walls before spreading throughout England and eventually across many territories of the British Empire. In this way, the Tower protected not only the crown itself, it also helped shape the economy of an entire kingdom. One of the most fascinating figures connected to the Royal Mint was Sir Isaac Newton. Most people remember him as the mathematician and physicist who wrote Philosophiae Naturalis Principia Mathematica. Far fewer remember that he also served first as Warden of the Mint and later as Master of the Mint. What makes this remarkable is that Newton never treated the position as merely an honor. He approached it with the discipline of a scientist. By the late 17th century, England faced a serious monetary crisis. Silver coins had been clipped, counterfeited, and circulated in increasingly unreliable forms. Newton applied scientific precision to reforming the currency. He supervised the great recoinage and relentlessly pursued counterfeiters, bringing the same analytical mind to finance that he had brought to astronomy and mathematics. For Newton, precision belonged not only to the stars or equations, but also to every coin passing from hand to hand. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in Man and His Symbols, "Man and his symbols show that it is possible for man to cooperate with the unconscious. Perhaps money itself is a symbol, Its value does not rest entirely in gold or silver. Its greatest worth lies in the collective trust shared by society. In a profound sense, currency is first a psychological symbol, only afterward an economic instrument. Not far from the royal mint stood the tower's armories and gunpowder stores. If money created stability, weapons declared that the kingdom could defend what it had built. For centuries, the tower safeguarded thousands of muskets, cannons, swords, spears, and enormous reserves of gunpowder for the crown's armies. From these storehouses, weapons were distributed to military campaigns, the defense of London, and moments of national crisis. Yet, despite containing immense military power, these armories demanded extraordinary care. A single mistake involving gunpowder could prove catastrophic. Perhaps the greatest power always requires the greatest discipline. Today, visitors entering the White Tower encounter one of the world's finest collections of royal armor. Steel breastplates gleam softly beneath museum lights, revealing not only remarkable craftsmanship, but also the heavy burden of warfare carried by earlier generations. Among the most celebrated pieces is the armor of Henry VIII. From a distance, it appears almost like a sculpture, yet standing close beside it, one realizes that it once separated life from death. These magnificent suits were never intended solely for protection. They also proclaimed wealth, status, and authority. Every engraved decoration and carefully crafted detail reflected both artistic mastery and political prestige. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious. The archetype is essentially an unconscious content that is altered by becoming conscious and by being perceived. Perhaps the warrior is one of humanity's oldest archetypes. A suit of armor therefore represents more than military equipment. It symbolizes courage, responsibility, and the desire to protect what one holds sacred. As centuries passed, warfare changed. New technologies transformed the battlefield. Gradually, the White Tower ceased to function as the center of England's military defenses. Instead, it became a museum, preserving the artifacts of generations that had gone before. There is something beautiful about that. A place once preparing for war, now helping people understand peace. The swords no longer leave their scabbards. The muskets fire no more. The armor no longer march into battle. Instead, these silent objects have become witnesses, quiet storytellers preserving memories of vanished centuries. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, "The least of things with a meaning is worth more in life than the greatest of things without it." An ancient coin, a sword, a swit of armor may no longer serve their original purpose, yet they carry the meaning of an entire civilization. Perhaps that is what makes the Tower of London so extraordinary. It does not merely preserve objects, it preserves memory. Every coin struck, every weapon stored, every suit of armor carefully protected, tells the story of how people built, defended, and ultimately transformed their world. And as evening gently settles over the White Tower, the great halls that once held weapons of war now rest in peaceful silence. Soft light reflects from polished steel, ancient swords, and centuries-old coins, as though history continues whispering in its own quiet language. Perhaps what survives after hundreds of years is not the power of cannons or the sharpness of blades. It is the enduring lesson that true authority can remain strong only when founded upon order, trust, and responsibility. And in the calm stillness of London tonight, the very objects once created for conflict have become the gentlest storytellers of peace, reminding us that the greatest achievement of any civilization is not its ability to wage war, but its wisdom to preserve memory, cultivate stability, and pass its hard-earned lessons from one generation to the next. Life inside the tower today. When the final gates of the Tower of London close each evening, most visitors leave with the feeling that history has ended for the day, sealed away with the echo of the locks during the ceremony of the keys. The stone pathways gradually empty. The clicking of cameras fades into silence. Tour groups return to the fast rhythm of modern London. Yet if you could remain inside for a few more hours, you would discover a gentle truth. The Tower of London is not only a historic monument, it is still a living community. There are people who wake, work, raise families, and quietly continue writing new chapters in a story that has lasted almost 1,000 years. Perhaps the greatest wonder of the tower is not its past, but the fact that it is still alive. At the heart of this remarkable community are the yeoman warders, better known to most visitors as the beefeaters. Dressed in their striking red and black uniforms embroidered with gold, they seem almost like figures who have stepped directly out of history. Yet beneath the ceremonial appearance are ordinary people with families, responsibilities, friendships, and daily routines. Becoming a yeoman warder is no simple achievement. Most have spent many years serving in the British Armed Forces before being selected through a demanding process. Today, their responsibilities extend far beyond guarding the tower and the crown jewels. They protect one of Britain's greatest historic treasures, guide visitors through centuries of history, preserve ancient ceremonies, and become storytellers whose own lives are now part of that history. What surprises many visitors is this: they do not simply work here, they actually live here. Within the ancient stone walls stand modest houses where the yeoman warders and their families make their homes. Children grow up inside the tower. Families gather around dinner tables, only a short walk from the White Tower. Behind simple wooden doors are warm lights, quiet conversations, laughter, homework, and the ordinary rhythms of everyday life. It feels almost impossible to imagine that a place, once known as a prison, has become a neighborhood filled with families. Perhaps this is one of history's most beautiful transformations. Places that once witnessed conflict, sorrow, and separation can eventually become places of peace when later generations choose to preserve them with care rather than fear. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, "The least of things with a meaning is worth more in life than the greatest of things without it." Perhaps an ordinary family dinner inside the tower carries more meaning than the magnificent halls once occupied by kings. Because everyday life proves something extraordinary. History does not exist only in memory. It continues to flow through ordinary days. Alongside the yeoman warders, live conservators, archivists, administrators, clergy, maintenance staff, and many others who together sustain this unique community. That means the tower does not come alive only when visitors arrive. People wake here, work here, and live here every day. Within the grounds also stands the Chapel Royal of St. Peter ad Vincula, where religious services continue to this day. The chaplain cares not only for the spiritual life of the resident community, but also helps preserve traditions that have endured across many centuries. It reminds us that a place cannot truly remain alive through buildings alone. It also needs a community, shared memories, shared traditions, and relationships between people. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in Man and His Symbols, "Man and his symbols show that it is possible for man to cooperate with the unconscious." According to Jung, rituals and symbols connect people not only to the past, but also to one another. Perhaps it is the quiet church services neighborhood conversations, and familiar daily customs that make the Tower of London more than an architectural monument. They make it a living culture. When the visitors leave, the tower begins a different rhythm. The guides have finished speaking. The crowds before the crown jewels disappear. The hurried footsteps fade away. Instead come the sounds of ravens returning to their perches. Soft golden lights fall gently across ancient stone. The gates close, following the ceremony of the keys. Families return home after work. Children finish their homework. Evening meals are prepared. Somewhere inside the walls, someone may be walking a dog along pathways once crossed by kings, queens, knights, prisoners, and ambassadors. Time has changed everything, yet it has never erased the spirit of this place. Many residents have described life inside the tower as feeling like a small village hidden within one of the world's busiest cities. People know one another. They meet during ceremonies, community events, and everyday life. Within a city of millions, there remains a tiny neighborhood bound together by history. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious. The archetype is essentially an unconscious content that is altered by becoming conscious and by being perceived. Perhaps home itself is one of humanity's deepest archetypes. A home is never created by walls alone. It is created by belonging. That may be what makes the tower so remarkable. It has been a fortress, a palace, a prison, and finally, a home. Perhaps that is time's greatest victory. Not simply turning a fortress into a museum, but transforming a place that witnessed so much human sorrow into somewhere people can live in peace. As night settles over the Tower of London, its ancient walls no longer reflect only the light of history. They also reflect the warm glow from windows where families gather together. The ravens have settled into sleep among the trees. The ceremony of the keys has ended. The distant bells of London blend softly with the quiet inside the fortress. Perhaps, if Carl Gustav Jung had wandered these pathways on such a peaceful evening, he would have recognized that the tower preserves far more than the history of England. It reflects one of the simplest truths about the human soul. After every war, after every struggle, after every rise, and every fall, what people long for is still the same. A place to return, a home, a community, a feeling of belonging. Perhaps those quiet gifts endure far longer than crowns, battles, or political triumphs. And in the stillness of London tonight, the Tower of London is no longer only a fortress of the past. It is a living home, still breathing, still changing, still welcoming new generations, and still telling its thousand-year story with the gentle rhythm of ordinary human life. A reminder that the most enduring monuments are not those built only of stone, but those that continue to shelter memory, community, and hope. Estate Peter ad Vincula Chapel, within the ancient stone walls of the Tower of London, a place that has witnessed magnificent coronations, political conspiracies, heartbreaking farewells, and nearly 1,000 years of history, stands a small building that many visitors quietly pass without noticing. It has no dazzling diamonds like the crown jewels, no towering walls like the White Tower, no mysterious ravens, no dramatic prison stories. And yet, perhaps this humble place is the quietest space in the entire tower. It is the Chapel Royal of Street Peter ad Vincula, a place where history no longer speaks through power, but through remembrance, forgiveness, and peace. As you step through the chapel's wooden doorway, the sounds of modern London seem to dissolve behind you. Only soft light remains, filtering through stained glass windows and falling gently across worn stone floors polished by centuries of footsteps. Nothing about the chapel overwhelms the visitor. Instead, it invites stillness. Perhaps What is sacred does not arise from grandeur, but from silence. The chapel itself is ancient. Although the present building was largely rebuilt during the reign of Henry VIII, a place of worship has stood here for many centuries. Its name, Street Peter ad Vincula, meaning Saint Peter in chains, recalls the biblical story of Saint Peter's imprisonment before his miraculous release. There is something deeply fitting about that name. Within it, freedom already exists, hidden behind chains. Perhaps no title could better suit the Tower of London itself, for countless people were imprisoned here, yet many proved that dignity and faith could never truly be confined. What makes this chapel especially remarkable is that it serves as the final resting place of some of England's most famous historical figures, among them Anne Boleyn and Lady Jane Grey. After Anne Boleyn was executed at Tower Green in 1536, her body was not carried to a magnificent royal tomb. Instead, she was buried quietly beneath the floor of this modest chapel. No longer a crown, no longer royal ceremonies, no longer the splendor of court, only a small place beneath the stones, where the queen who forever changed English history finally came to rest. Centuries later, during renovations ordered by Queen Victoria, archaeological investigations helped identify Anne's burial location, along with those of several others executed at the tower. Today, her name is respectfully commemorated near her resting place. Perhaps history sometimes offers its recognition long after it can change the past. Nearby lies Lady Jane Grey, remembered as the 9 Days Queen. Still only a teenager, Jane became a reluctant figure caught within political struggles she had never truly chosen. Following her execution in 1554, she too was laid to rest inside this same chapel. 2 women, 2 lives, so different, yet ultimately resting side by side, where power can no longer separate rank or title. Perhaps this is one of history's quietest lessons. Before time, before death, and before the silence of centuries, every title eventually becomes as light as dust. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Perhaps these graves do not ask us simply to remember death. They invite us to acknowledge the fragility of power, the brevity of youth, and the difficult choices people are sometimes forced to make under circumstances beyond their control. Yet one of the chapel's most remarkable qualities is this: it is not merely a historic monument, it remains a living place of worship. Even today, religious services continue here. The yeoman warders and their families still gather within these walls. Prayers are still offered. Hymns still echo beneath the same wooden roof that has sheltered generations before them. There is something profoundly moving about this. A place that once received the dead now continues to welcome prayers for the living. Perhaps this is one of time's greatest miracles. Places once associated with grief can slowly become places where hope quietly grows. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in Man and His Symbols, "Man and his symbols show that it is possible for man to cooperate with the unconscious." For Jung, religious symbols belonged not only to faith but also to the deepest layers of the human psyche. Perhaps Street Peter ad Vincula serves exactly this purpose. It is more than a chapel. It is a place where memory, loss, healing, and meaning can quietly meet. Perhaps it is no accident that such a chapel stands at the heart of a fortress. Throughout history, power and faith have often walked side by side. Today, many visitors enter the chapel not merely to admire its history. They sit quietly for a few moments, read the memorial inscriptions, watch sunlight passing through stained glass, and experience a rare kind of peace that words seldom capture. Inside, no one speaks loudly. No one rushes. People simply walk more slowly, as though time itself has chosen to slow its pace. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious. The archetype is essentially an unconscious content that is altered by becoming conscious and by being perceived. Perhaps the image of a sacred sanctuary is one of humanity's oldest archetypes. Whether found in churches, temples, synagogues, mosques, or quiet shrines, such places help people feel connected to something greater than themselves. Street Peter ad Vincula serves that same timeless purpose. It preserves not only the memory of Anne Boleyn or Lady Jane Grey, it preserves something even deeper: history's capacity for mercy. Because, in the end, history exists not only to remember what happened, but also to teach each generation how to release the burdens of yesterday. As evening settles gently over the Tower of London, small lamps cast a warm glow throughout the quiet chapel. Outside, the ancient stone walls continue their silent watch, as they have for centuries. Inside, every sound seems softened. Only time remains. Memory remains. Faith remains. Perhaps this modest chapel has closed the earthly journeys of many people who shaped the history of England. Yet it also opens something greater for those who enter today. It reminds us that beyond every struggle for power, beyond every triumph and every tragedy, what ultimately endures is neither the throne nor the sword. It is the human capacity to remember with compassion, to forgive with humility, and to discover peace within the stillness of one's own soul. And in the gentle quiet of the Tower of London tonight, the Chapel Royal of Street Peter ad Vincula continues to whisper that timeless lesson to every visitor willing to pause, listen, and allow history not through its victories, but through its silence to speak. The Tower of London during the World Wars. When most people think of the Tower of London, their minds travel to the Middle Ages, to Norman kings, Tudor queens, and stories that unfolded hundreds of years ago. Yet the tower's history did not end with those distant centuries. Even as the 20th century introduced airplanes, tanks, and industrial warfare, this ancient fortress remained where it had always stood, watching, waiting, enduring. Perhaps what makes the Tower of London truly remarkable is not simply that it has survived for nearly 1,000 years. It is that it has continued to walk beside time without ever losing its soul. Imagine an autumn evening in 1940. The skies above London are no longer peaceful. Air raid sirens echo across the city. Families hurry towards shelters. High overhead, formations of German bombers approach during the campaign history remembers as the Blitz. Fires erupt across neighborhoods. Columns of smoke darken the sky. A city that had stood for centuries suddenly finds itself living through nights filled with explosions and uncertainty. And amid it all, the Tower of London remains standing, as it had through so many wars before. During the Blitz, the tower itself did not escape damage. Several buildings within the complex were struck by bombs and suffered varying degrees of destruction. Yet remarkably, the White Tower, the fortress's ancient heart, survived. Perhaps walls raised nearly 1,000 years earlier fulfilled a purpose their Norman builders could never have imagined. It was not only a triumph of architecture, it was also a victory of memory over destruction. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." War has always been one of humanity's greatest shadows. Yet perhaps it is during such darkness that people discover what they truly wish to protect. The tower was preserved not merely because it was old. It represented something larger, a nation's memory, its identity, its continuity. Across generations. During the war years, the tower also became connected with one of the 20th century's most controversial figures, Rudolf Hess, as deputy Führer of Nazi Germany, and one of Adolf Hitler's closest associates. Hess astonished the world in May 1941 by flying alone to Scotland in what appears to have been an unauthorized attempt to seek some form of peace with Britain. The mission ended with capture. Following his arrest, Hess was briefly held in the Tower of London before being transferred elsewhere. There is something extraordinary about that. A place that had once held Thomas More, Guy Fawkes, Walter Raleigh, now also held a prisoner from the Second World War. It reminds us that the tower belongs not only to medieval history, it continued to stand at the crossroads of modern history as well. Yet amid the stories of bombing raids and prisoners, perhaps the most beautiful image from those difficult years is something far simpler: vegetable gardens. Inside the moat, during the war, Britain endured severe food shortages caused by blockade and conflict. The government launched the nationwide Dig for Victory campaign, encouraging citizens to cultivate every available piece of land. Even the ancient moat surrounding the tower was transformed into gardens, once dug to keep enemies out. It now helped keep people alive. There is profound beauty in that transformation. Ground once prepared for war became soil that nurtured life. Perhaps it remains one of history's most hopeful symbols. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in Man and His Symbols, "Man and his symbols show that it is possible for man to cooperate with the unconscious." For Jung, symbols help human beings move through fear. A garden planted during wartime becomes such a symbol. It quietly declares that however uncertain tomorrow may be, life is still worth cultivating. People sow seeds, not because they know peace will certainly return, but because they believe tomorrow deserves hope. Perhaps even more remarkable was another tradition that refused to disappear: the ceremony of the keys. Throughout the Second World War, despite bombings and air raid sirens, the nightly locking ceremony continued with extraordinary consistency. On some evenings, bombs exploded nearby. The ceremony was delayed only minutes, then quietly continued. From a military perspective, this may seem insignificant, yet spiritually, it meant everything. Each evening, the ancient keys were carried through the gates exactly as generations before had done. Each evening affirmed something deeply important. War could shake the city, but it could not shake who they were. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious. The archetype is essentially an unconscious content that is altered by becoming conscious and by being perceived. Rituals preserved across centuries are more than habits. They become part of a people's collective identity. When life grows uncertain, familiar ceremonies quietly remind communities that some foundations remain unchanged. Perhaps it is not great victories, but faithful, daily traditions that carry people through their darkest seasons. When the war finally ended, London began rebuilding. New buildings rose, streets were restored. The city gradually healed, yet the tower remained almost exactly where it had always been, like an ancient tree, standing after another storm. Jung often suggested that genuine maturity comes not from avoiding suffering but from carrying one's wounds with wisdom. Perhaps the tower teaches the same lesson. The scars left by war did not diminish its meaning, they deepened it. Today, as evening settles peacefully over London, it is difficult to imagine that these quiet skies once glowed red with fire. The moat that once grew wartime vegetables now reflects the gentle lights of the modern city. The ceremony of the keys still unfolds each night, as it has for centuries. The stone walls continue their silent watch not as monuments to war, but as symbols of endurance. Perhaps the Tower of London's greatest lesson, after 2 world wars, is not found in the bomb scars left upon its stones. It is found in humanity's determination to preserve what truly matters, even during its most difficult hours. Because in the end, civilizations survive not only through military strength, they endure through memory, through tradition, through hope, and through the quiet courage to keep planting seeds of life even while the echoes of war still linger in the sky. The Tower of London in the modern age. After nearly 1,000 years of witnessing conquests, coronations, political intrigue, executions, and even the bombings of the 20th century, the Tower of London still stands quietly beside the River Thames, like a storyteller who has never grown weary. The remarkable thing is that time has not left it behind. Instead, it continues to exist at the heart of one of the world's most modern cities, where glass skyscrapers reflect the morning sun, underground trains race beneath the streets, and millions of people move through the rhythm of the 21st century. Yet amid all that motion, the tower remains calm, almost as if time itself flows here, at a different pace. Perhaps not every building can journey with time, but there are places that make time itself pause to listen. In 1988, the Tower of London was officially designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The recognition honored far more than the architectural brilliance of a Norman fortress. It acknowledged the tower's extraordinary place in the history of Britain and in the shared heritage of humanity. Because the tower does not tell only the story of one nation, it tells the story of how human beings have built power, preserved tradition, endured tragedy, and learned to grow through the passing centuries. When a place becomes World Heritage, it no longer belongs only to one nation. It becomes part of the memory of us all. Today, millions of visitors from every corner of the globe walk through the tower's ancient gates each year. Some come to admire the crown jewels. Others hope to meet the famous ravens. Some are fascinated by Tudor history. Others simply want to place a hand upon stones that have endured for nearly a millennium. The beautiful thing is this: each visitor arrives with a different question, yet almost everyone leaves feeling they have heard a story far greater than themselves. Despite welcoming such enormous crowds, the tower has never become a noisy spectacle. Instead, it preserves a rhythm entirely its own. The moment visitors pass beneath its ancient gateway, the sounds of modern London seem to soften. Its thick stone walls absorb the city's constant movement, creating a silence that gently encourages people to slow their steps. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, "The least of things with a meaning is worth more in life than the greatest of things without it." Perhaps it is meaning itself that gives the tower its enduring power, not the stones alone, but the countless human stories entrusted to those stones over nearly 1,000 years. One of Britain's greatest achievements has been refusing to isolate the tower from the modern world. Instead, it has preserved the fortress as a living part of the city. Outside is London of the 21st century. Inside, the heartbeat of centuries still continues. Every day, conservation specialists carefully maintain each stone, timber, roof tile, doorway, and artifact. Their goal is not to make the tower appear new. It is to allow it to continue growing older with dignity, while ensuring future generations may still experience its history. Perhaps conservation is not a struggle against time, but a way of walking beside it with respect. One of the most striking views from the tower is that of Tower Bridge. Many visitors assume the bridge was built alongside the fortress. In reality, Tower Bridge was completed in 1894, almost 8 centuries after the tower itself. What makes this especially fascinating is that, although the bridge belongs to the industrial age, its architects deliberately chose the Gothic Revival style so that it would harmonize with the medieval character of the tower. That decision was no accident. Its designers understood that an aggressively modern structure standing beside the tower might overwhelm the historic landscape. Instead of competing with history, they chose to honor it. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in Man and His Symbols, "Man and his symbols show that it is possible for man to cooperate with the unconscious." Jung believed that symbols help connect past and present. Perhaps Tower Bridge and the Tower of London together form such a partnership. One represents medieval England. The other reflects Britain's industrial transformation, different eras, standing together, in quiet harmony. They remind us that progress does not require erasing the past. Sometimes, the future can simply enter into conversation with history, respectfully. Perhaps this explains why the tower continues to move so many people, not merely because it is beautiful, nor because it is ancient, but because it reminds modern humanity that every generation stands upon foundations built by countless lives before its own. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious. The archetype is essentially an unconscious content that is altered by becoming conscious and by being perceived. The Tower of London can itself be understood as an archetype of collective memory. It is more than a location on a map. It is an image that people from every culture can recognize instinctively, an image of continuity, endurance, and history. There are places built not only of stone, but also of memory, of belief, and of stories passed gently from one generation to another. As evening descends, the final sunlight turns the tower's ancient walls to gold, while the glass towers of modern London reflect a sky fading into soft shades of violet. Tower Bridge stretches gracefully across the Thames, connecting both banks of the city as it has for more than a century. The day's final visitors quietly depart. The ravens return to their roosts, and preparations begin for the nightly ceremony of the keys. Perhaps it is in that peaceful moment that the tower reveals its greatest lesson. A civilization is not measured solely by the new monuments it creates. It is measured by its willingness to preserve the treasures entrusted to it by the past. Amid the restless energy of modern London, the tower continues to breathe with the slower rhythm of history. It reminds us that we can only truly understand where we are going if we remember where we came from. And as night settles gently over the Thames, with Tower Bridge standing beside its ancient neighbor beneath the evening sky, past and present no longer seem separate. Instead, they become chapters of a single story, a story nearly 1,000 years long, quiet, beautiful, and still being written, 1,000-year legacy. And so, after a journey stretching across nearly 1,000 years of history, we find ourselves back where every story began. Before us stand the same quiet, grey stone walls of the Tower of London, yet perhaps they no longer look the way they did when we first arrived. At the beginning, we saw a fortress. Now, after walking together through the age of the Norman kings, the Tudor queens, the crown jewels, the legends of the ravens, hidden gardens, world wars, and the peaceful lives of today's residents, the tower appears as something far greater, a vast book, written in stone, in time, and in the memories of countless generations. There are places built to endure for decades. There are places built for centuries, but perhaps the Tower of London was built for time itself. Across nearly 1,000 years, this remarkable place has worn many identities. It has been a fortress, raised after the Norman conquest to proclaim the authority of William the Conqueror. It has been a royal palace, where kings and queens lived, welcomed ambassadors, and shaped the destiny of a kingdom. It has been a prison, holding some of Europe's most influential figures, from Sir Thomas More to Guy Fawkes to Rudolf Hess. It has been a treasury, protecting the crown jewels, the sacred symbols of the British monarchy. It has been a royal mint, an armory, a royal menagerie, a center of government, a living community, and today, one of humanity's most treasured cultural landmarks. How extraordinary that one place could carry so many different identities. Yet perhaps the most important question is not what the tower has been. The more important question is what it has witnessed. It has watched kings rise to the throne and watched kings leave it. It has witnessed sacred oaths, painful betrayals, tears, victories, defeats, and the quiet passing of time. During those 1,000 years, England transformed again and again. Dynasties succeeded one another. An empire expanded across continents before gradually receding. The Industrial Revolution reshaped civilization. 2 world wars shook the modern age. London became one of the world's greatest cities. Yet, the Tower remained, not as a conqueror, but as a silent witness. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, "One looks back with appreciation to the brilliant teachers, but with gratitude to those who touched our human feelings." Perhaps history is much the same. It teaches us not only through victories or dates, but through stories that reach the deepest parts of the human heart. And after nearly 1,000 years, the Tower of London continues to do exactly that. Jung also wrote in Man and His Symbols. Man and his symbols show that it is possible for man to cooperate with the unconscious. According to Jung, great symbols always outlive the people who create them. They become part of humanity's collective unconscious, allowing future generations to connect with experiences they never personally lived. Perhaps the Tower of London has become one such symbol. It belongs not only to Britain, but to the shared memory of humanity. Because within the story of the Tower, we do not merely discover the history of England, we discover our own human story, the longing to build power, the fear of loss, loyalty, betrayal, hope, forgiveness, and, ultimately, growth through time. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious. The archetype is essentially an unconscious content that is altered by becoming conscious and by being perceived. Perhaps every visitor who walks through the tower's ancient gate brings that archetype to life once more. Not to glorify war, nor to celebrate power, but to remember that every civilization is built upon memory, and every memory deserves to be preserved with gratitude. Now, the sun has begun to disappear behind the ancient towers. The final light bathes the white tower in soft gold before slowly fading into the deep blue evening sky above London. The last visitors have quietly departed. The ceremony of the keys begins once again, as it has for more than 7 centuries. The great gates close with the same keys that have passed through the hands of countless kings, queens, warders, and generations. Outside the walls, London continues its endless rhythm. Cars cross Tower Bridge. The underground carries thousands of passengers beneath the streets. Office lights fade one by one. The River Thames flows on, as it always has. Inside the tower, however, another rhythm quietly endures. The ravens settle into the ancient trees. The chapel grows still. The stone corridors fall silent, and history seems to exhale. Perhaps that is the tower's greatest gift. It reminds us that history is not something trapped inside museums or hidden within old books. History lives whenever we choose, to remember, whenever we protect what previous generations entrusted to us, whenever we tell their stories with honesty and compassion. Carl Gustav Jung believed that becoming whole requires us to embrace both light and shadow, to acknowledge triumph alongside failure, courage beside fear, hope alongside grief. Perhaps the Tower of London embodies that very lesson. Within its walls, glory and tragedy have always stood together. Kings celebrated victories here. Queens met their final mornings here. Prisoners discovered unexpected courage here. Children now grow up here. Life continued, even after the darkest chapters had ended. Perhaps that is why this ancient fortress continues to move us so deeply, not because it survived 1,000 years, but because it teaches us how humanity survives time itself. And now, as night gently settles over the Tower of London, the old stones seem almost to whisper one final thought. Power fades, empires change, crowns pass, names are eventually forgotten, yet kindness, memory, courage, and the stories we choose to preserve may continue long after we ourselves have become part of history. Thank you for sharing this peaceful journey through nearly 1,000 years of the Tower of London's remarkable story. If this quiet walk through history helped you slow down, reflect, or discover something new, I would be honored if you joined us again on another evening. Until then, may your mind grow still, may your heart remain light, and may the stories of the past accompany you gently into peaceful dreams. Good night, sleep well, and I'll see you on our next journey through history. Somewhere, the ravens have returned to their familiar resting place. They fold their dark wings beneath the night sky, as though they, too, are quietly keeping the ancient promise that generations of Britons have whispered from one century to the next. A gentle breeze moves across the stones that have endured for nearly 1,000 years. Those walls still stand, no longer to repel invading armies, no longer to imprison kings or traitors, no longer to display the might of monarchs. They stand now to tell stories, stories of courage and of mistakes, of triumph and tragedy, of people who came and went, while time itself continued its silent journey. Perhaps that is history's greatest beauty. It does not keep people forever, but it always preserves the meaning they leave behind. As night finally settles over the Tower of London, the fortress returns to the quiet that has become its oldest companion. The ravens have fallen silent. The River Thames continues its patient journey, just as it has for countless generations. The ancient stone walls remain beneath a sky filled with stars, as though time itself had never truly departed. Perhaps it is in that moment that we understand something profound. The Tower of London has never been merely a fortress of stone. It is the memory of a nation, a symbol of endurance through every age of uncertainty, a gentle reminder that every earthly power will one day pass away. Every dynasty will eventually become history. Yet the values built upon courage, perseverance, wisdom, and compassion can continue long after kingdoms have disappeared. And perhaps, like these walls that have stood firm for nearly 1,000 years, each of us may also carry within ourselves a quiet place, strong enough to protect the finest parts of our soul, whatever time may bring. And so our journey tonight also reaches its final steps. When we first arrived, the Tower of London appeared as an ancient fortress of cold stone, heavy gates, and stories that seemed to belong only to distant history. But the longer we listened, the more we discovered that it has never been only architecture. It is a living memory, carrying within it nearly 1,000 years of Britain's story. Every stone has watched countless sunrises and sunsets. Every corridor has known the footsteps of kings and queens, prisoners, soldiers, children, and the ordinary families who still call the tower home today. Perhaps the tower's greatness has never rested upon the height of its walls, nor upon the brilliance of the crown jewels. Its greatness lies in its remarkable ability to remember wars, fire, political upheaval, the passing of centuries. None of these erased its story. The tower still stands, like a patient storyteller, speaking not through words, but through quiet presence. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." Perhaps that is what tonight's journey has gently invited us to do. We began by looking at an English fortress, yet little by little, we discovered ourselves within its stories, because history is never only about people who lived centuries ago. It reflects the same hopes and fears that still live within every human heart today. The longing to be loved, the fear of losing what matters, the desire to leave behind something meaningful, and the quiet hope that our lives, too, may become part of a story worth remembering. Jung also wrote in Man and His Symbols, "Man and his symbols show that it is possible for man to cooperate with the unconscious." Perhaps this is why places like the Tower of London continue to move us so deeply, not because they are simply old, but because they awaken something ancient within us, a shared memory that transcends language, culture, and nationality. The meaning of home, tradition, loyalty, sacrifice, and the gentle passage of time. Tonight we have walked together through the White Tower. We stood before the crown jewels. We listened to the stories of Anne Boleyn, Lady Jane Grey, kings, prisoners, the ravens, and the ceremony of the keys that has endured for more than 7 centuries. We discovered a place that has been a fortress, a palace, a prison, a treasury, a royal menagerie, a community, and above all, a witness. But perhaps the greatest lesson the tower offers is found in none of its treasures. It is found in time. Time can wear away stone. It can replace dynasties. It can reduce kings to names upon the pages of history. Yet time can also heal. It can transform a place, once marked by conflict, into a place of peace. It can turn a fortress into a symbol of shared human heritage. It can transform sorrow into wisdom. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in Aeon, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain. No person grows without hardship, neither does a civilization." Perhaps the tower still stands today not because it escaped suffering, but because it endured suffering and continued to stand. Some walls are built to resist enemies, some walls to protect treasure, but others are built to preserve memory. And memory, when guarded with honesty and care, always becomes part of the future. Now imagine that night has completely embraced the tower. The River Thames quietly reflects the golden lights of London. Tower Bridge stands peacefully beside the ancient fortress, like a gentle guardian of time. The ravens sleep among the old trees. The ceremony of the keys has ended. The ancient keys have once again been placed safely away, just as they have been every evening for countless generations. The families living within the tower have turned out their lights. The stone pathways have grown still. The evening breeze drifts softly across walls that have stood for almost 1,000 years. And perhaps the tower itself has fallen asleep. Perhaps every ancient place possesses its own quiet heartbeat. Perhaps every stone carries a memory. And perhaps, after listening to nearly 1,000 years of history, our own hearts have become just a little quieter too. If tonight's journey has brought you a moment of peace, if it has helped you unwind after a long day, if it has allowed you to discover history through a gentler and more thoughtful lens, I warmly invite you to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share this journey with others who love history, psychology, and stories told slowly enough to calm the mind. and deeply enough to touch the soul. Your support allows these peaceful journeys to continue. Together, we will explore more ancient civilizations, uncover more mysteries of the human mind through the insights of Carl Gustav Jung, and wander through history, one quiet evening at a time. Thank you for walking beside me throughout this remarkable journey. Now, let every thought drift as gently as the River Thames beneath the moonlight. Let the ancient walls of the Tower of London quietly stand watch over your sleep. Let the ravens carry away the worries of today into the peaceful darkness. And let your mind rest within the calm embrace of history, of time, and of stories that never truly end. May your night be peaceful. May your dreams be as gentle as moonlight resting upon the ancient stones of the tower. May you awaken tomorrow with a lighter heart, a clearer mind, and a quiet gratitude for the stories that time has patiently preserved across nearly 1,000 years. Sleep well, and until our next journey together, good night.